It's so nice to meet all of you. Happy Friday. I can see some of your videos are on. If you feel like it, would love to see more faces. It's always weird to be presenting to black boxes with names in it, but I respect that. Um, I'm Jinal Shah, as she introduced us. Um, what I've done today is I figured I would give you a brief introduction to myself, my career path. But I know this is second to last series of your sessions for the Made Summer series. So what I wanted to actually share with you guys is a couple learnings that I've had in my 15 years of my career and things that I wish, although there's nothing in my past that I would change, but things that I wish a mentor or someone would have said to me very explicitly if I was beginning my career right now. Um, I'm I'm assuming, but most of you are looking for careers in advertising or marketing, correct? Just give me a raise of hands or use the reaction function. Okay, I can see a few. Cool. Yep, great, great. So yeah, so that is that has been my career path as well. And what I'm about to share with you, hopefully I'll give you more context and stories around that as well, and why that is a learning I wish to highlight and pass on to you. But I want to keep this conversational. It's Friday. I'm in a beautiful place upstate New York, which I'm calling fake Switzerland. So I'm definitely not keen on hearing my own voice. So please ask questions and let's make it interactive. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. All right. Great. You can all see my screen. Give me a few thumbs ups. Okay, perfect. So I named this presentation what I've learned about honing my craft. And I think that's why, like, I call my learnings basically a journey towards me becoming a better marketer, better leader. A brief introduction to myself first. I started my career as a journalist. That's what I studied in college. I graduated as one. I was working at InStyle and Lucky magazines. And after that, I pivoted and spent about a decade in first few years in a digital strategy consulting role. And then the next 6 years at J. Walter Thompson, which is one of the largest advertising agencies, or was. They're now Wunderman Thompson. In 2016, I made the move to join brands. I felt that I learned a significant amount from the agency world, and I wanted to learn something different. So I moved to the brand side. Now I'm also an advisor to startups and young companies, creative businesses, and I'm a mentor to many. I was very fortunate early in my career to have some incredible mentors, and um, this is my preferred way of giving back. Some of the brands that I worked at, as I mentioned, J. Walter Thompson, and then I've been at Newell brands. You may not have heard of Newell, but you definitely have heard of all the products that they sell. So Sharpie, Rubbermaid, Marmot, Yankee Candle Company, all of those big brands belong to Newell Brands. It's like a holding company. I also worked for 2 years at Swell, which is a very cool water bottle company. How many of you have heard of Swell? I actually have my bottle with me right now. Okay, several of you. And then I joined Feather earlier this year. I am also an advisor to the CFDA, which is a American Fashion Federation. Nest, which is an amazing nonprofit that focuses on helping artisanal businesses. And then I'm a big sister through the Big Brother Big Sister program. I also have been actually with AEF. This is my 6th year going. I love what AEF does, and I've spoken at many colleges as guest lecturer as part of their program. You know, I think marketer is one way to sum up what I do, but the way I think of myself is I do 3 things. I'm either building new behaviors. So for example, with Feather, getting consumers to think of renting furniture is a behavior that doesn't necessarily exist. So I see my job as building new behaviors. Something that I've also done in the past is change existing behaviors or reinforce existing behaviors, which is really what marketing is about. If someone tells you marketing is just about selling and selling more and building brands. That is sure, that is one part of it, but it's much more deeper and more significant than that. And that's how I view my role. What this results in, of course, it results in a better, stronger brand. And when I say increased cultural and commercial capital for organizations, a simple way of saying, or more complex way of saying, building better brands and building more revenue for brands. I think if you keep that as core of mind, like what are we ultimately trying our consumers to do and what are we trying to get them to do, and you follow that as a playbook, you do get very often the right results. So I want to start by telling you, few things that I've learned in the course of the 15 years of my career. And I'll share with you a few stories along the way. Feel free again to ask any questions or make it more conversational. So the first thing, knowing how to do things makes you a better marketer. I cannot stress this enough. This may sound this is definitely going to date me, but I was early in my career, I was one of the strategists that had helped major brands convince them to go online. And when I say online, on social media. I remember being in meeting rooms convincing American Express to get on Facebook, to get on Twitter. And, it was really weird now thinking about it. It's like, wow, wait, somebody actually had to do that. And like, of course, someone had to do that, right? Social media didn't exist as a channel, as a marketing channel back then. But I was able to do that and speak confidently do that because I myself was a prolific user of these platforms. And this is a very simple way of explaining what I mean by here, which is learn how to do things. But it is important. It is important that you know ins and outs of what you're trying to, where you're trying to market your audiences, where your audiences are, because knowing the nuances is what's going to make you better at your job. So what this means in this universe and this day and age is learn Canva, learn Google Analytics, learn how to use Figma actually. Learn all these tools that you may, in your head, you're like, oh, but I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not going to be a social media person. I'm not going to be an analytics person. It doesn't matter. Learn these things, because what it's going to do is then when you work with creatives, when you work with analysts, or if you ever become one, you will be able to have more intelligent conversations with them because you know these things. So this is like number one thing. Again, I can only articulate it because that's how I've behaved. And I realize now in connecting the dots in my career that, oh, like, wow, that's why I was able to convince all these people to do these things. So learn how to do things. Don't just read about them, don't just hear about them. I believe you have someone from TikTok coming in next week. Play with it. Instagram just launched Reels, like make your own Reels. The nice thing about this generation is there isn't really a silo between social for work and social for fun and personal lives. So just be a doer. Second thing I will say, common sense is very important. I cannot tell you how easy it is to forget this piece. If you find yourself being in meetings where everyone seems to be agreeing to something or saying, oh yes, this idea is great. If you have a question in your mind, if there's something that niggles you, if there's something that's like, wait, but I don't get it. This doesn't make sense to me. Speak up, because you are very often listening, that's your common sense, maybe trying to speak to you. Listen to it. You'll find that as you move ahead in your career path as leaders, as you're part of more organizations and in meetings, oftentimes common sense becomes it's forgotten. It's forgotten for various reasons. It's forgotten because there's someone very important in the room who's speaking, and we attribute like, oh, because they're important, because they're senior, they must know all the answers. Not always true. So we tend to forget this. Or if everybody, the press, the media, the world is hyping about something, it's like, oh, like we should do this. Even if it makes no sense to what your brand or business is, use your common sense. So do not devalue common sense. Listen to that gut, listen to that wiggle when it speaks to you, because that is what's going to make you a better marketer. Substance. So marketing and advertising is one of those things where You know, everybody is talented. I truly believe this. I believe everyone is talented. You know, they have to figure out where their talents lie, but everyone's talented. However, it doesn't mean everybody has something important to say in the right moment. So if you're in a meeting, let's say on supply chain, if you don't have something important to say, don't say it. But if you do have something important to say that's relevant, not only figure out how you can say it, but how do you say it? That is something, a skill very few have. And this, as you start developing this piece, this is what also as you grow older will realize is called executive presence. Executive presence is about showing up in a meeting with focus and with intentionality. I know these words sound so like I probably just read some how to live a good life book, but as you know, um, this is what executive coaches will tell you. It's like, how are you showing up in a meeting? And when you do have something to say, how do you deliver it? That's a gift. To be able to have something to say that's relevant and a very articulate, concise, brief way to say it, it's deeply important. So focus on cultivating substance and focus on making sure that that's your reputation centered around. I can tell you very quickly, like people are going to, if you develop a reputation of someone that just wants to say something because their voice needs to be heard, people will figure that out about you. And that is not the kind of reputation you want to develop. I understand, and I've been there myself. Sometimes you feel FOMO, sometimes you see others doing it. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I should say something. I feel like I should say something. I'm the only person who hasn't said anything in the meeting. I totally get it. I've been there and I still get those types of feelings. But you know, if you choose to focus on substance over consistently having something to say, you will come out the winner over time. This is also an important one. Look, I'm not saying promotions aren't important, but skills are more important. I often use these, I often talk about this notion of like, screw the ladder, walk the circle. So what I did for myself, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, I created a pie chart. And in the pie chart, I put every single skill that I thought a marketer should have, right? And everything from like events and digital marketing and television marketing and analytics and omni-channel and you know like literally I filled the whole thing, e-commerce, paid media, like I literally filled out with everything that I could, and I decided that I was going to play the long game. I decided that I wanted to focus on learning as much as I could about these different skills versus just being blindly promoted in my one area. Now, this would depend very differently on where you are. If you end up in one of those big organizations like a Unilever or P&G, they usually are very good about shifting you through different roles so you get a chance to learn many different skills. If you end up in an agency, chances are you'll either be an account manager, a planner, and like there's like 5 or 6 different roles that you end up sort of being in one of them. If that is what ends up happening, and if that is what ends up being your career path, make sure you're prioritizing learning different skills. So if that means maybe picking on different projects, maybe lobbying to be on different projects where you can learn different things. However you decide to do this, I would, I would I would like underscore this, like learn the skills, you know, walk the full circle because it will make you a full stack marketer. And then you can actually, you know, the promotions will come to you. And I don't just mean that. I'm a brown girl, like promotions haven't just come to me. But I mean, that's a conversation for another day. But I have always prioritized skills and substance, and that has paid dividends for me. These two are really important and connected. I know I kind of wish, you know, when I was starting out in the agency world, someone had told me, Jinal, just go learn Excel. I had to learn it rather late in my career when I moved to client side, and I'm still not amazing at it, but I know how to make some formulas and I know how to read P&L reports and, you know, accounting reports, but learn math. Learn specifically business math, finance, read as much as you can about it. There's an amazing book that I recommend. It is about how Warren Buffett chooses to invest in companies. I'm blanking on the name of the book, but if you just Google Warren Buffett in Amazon, I'm sure it's going to show up. It's written by Mary Buffett, who was his daughter-in-law. And it's really important, and this is tied in with my next one, which is understand how companies make and lose money. So, you know, now, especially this is what 2020, investing in stocks has become so easy. If you are someone who's inclined towards learning about that, towards being a part of the stock market, and has a deep interest in your own personal finance, educate yourself about that. Even if you are not interested in stocks, take an interest in your personal finance and learn about the stock market, learn about how to make investments, learn about how Warren Buffett or other companies make investments, read like the annual reports of the companies, understand how companies make money and lose money. This is really important. I'll give you an example why. I was actually just speaking with a recent, like just last week, with a friend of mine who's chief strategy officer at an agency. And she was in a meeting at a huge uh, performance clothing company and athleisure that we all know about. And she was sort of watching their agency present all these ideas. And she's sitting there like nodding her head. She's like, holy shit, the agency doesn't understand that this company, majority of their revenue still comes from wholesale. So this company is suddenly not going to make like a, build like an online experience where, one individual like, goes in and shops for you and comes, and like, that's just not the kind of investment this company is going to make. So when you understand how companies make and lose money, it's going to give you a stronger judgment call over how to direct creative ideas towards them, when to sort of push your creative teams, when to reel them in. Even as a marketer, like, you'll know that, okay, this is how the companies are making money. They've been making money this way for the last 20 years. And this way of making money is evolving. We need to diversify. So let's actually push new creative ideas to them. It's just going to give you a whole new language with which to speak about, which, trust me, a lot of people going into the world of marketing, or, more people going into agency world, do not understand how companies make money. I worked with creative directors who we were working on a credit card company who had no idea how credit card companies make money. And I'd be very surprised if many of you here know how credit card companies make money, even though you all probably use credit cards or debit cards. So these things are important, like, ultimately what we are all here to do is either make companies money or save companies money. And if we don't understand the fundamentals of this, then we'll never be amazing at our jobs. The other two are also related, osmosis. Marketing, agency life, creative life can often become a very strong echo chamber. And what that means is you're often just speaking to yourself. You're reading the same few books, like, what did Ad Age say? What did Ad Week say? What does Fast Company say? What that's going to mean is you're going to think like everybody else. You're going to have the same access to information that everybody else has. So what I would recommend you do is make friends with people who are not in your industries. If you have friends from college who are doctors, or going to go into investment banking, or going to have completely different career paths, keep them close. Our world of advertising and marketing can become very insular, and it can suck you right in if you don't pay attention to that. And this is really, really important, because this is how your brain will remain fresh. I talked about substance earlier. Substance comes from exposing yourself to different ideas, to different knowledge sources, and to different ways of thinking, which you will absolutely not get if you're only surrounding yourselves with your kind of people. I'll give you an example. I'm so far ahead, and when I say ahead, I mean age-wise, in my career. I'm 15 years in, and I still choose to do this. Just this morning, actually, I had an amazing conversation with a woman who is chief brand protection officer at Colgate. And I was like, what does that role even mean? That sounds so fascinating. Her job is to basically protect Colgate from making sure their goods don't get counterfeited, so that people don't make fake Colgate toothpastes and toothbrushes. And like, my mind was blown with everything she shared. And there's a whole other world out there, and her job involves often working with Interpol and with Homeland Security and customs officials and governments in China. And it was just so fascinating. Like, that will never be my career path. That's not something I necessarily will ever do, but that knowledge to me is it's making me richer as a marketer. It's making me richer as a business person. So think about how you can continuously expose yourself to those types of stimuli that's going to make you richer. If you have options to go to conferences, I will be super honest, I have not learned a single thing from going to marketing conferences, not a single thing. Go to conferences that are different from you. Go to one about direct to consumer world. or go to one on finance. I don't know, making it like find conferences that have nothing to do with your world, because I'll tell you two reasons. One, you can find pretty much all the content you want about marketing online anyways. Two, you can network with everybody in marketing very easily. The other kinds of information are harder to find. So, cultivate your curiosity. And this is again related, like take a break. I cannot stress enough, but I don't know if you guys know this, but Bill Gates literally, I don't know if he still does it, but one of his core practices was taking away a couple of weeks a year, and he would go on solo vacations, and he would literally just go with a journal, and he would surf or whatever, and he would just like meditate and reflect and think and write, and then he would come back refreshed. For the last 3 years in my roles that I've always done this. Every 6 months, I will take like a 1 week, 10 days off, and really just completely unplug. Yeah, I'll pay attention to what's happening on Slack with my company, be there for my team if they need it, but really unplug, because several reasons. One, if you are in a good mental state of mind, if you're inspired, if you're excited, that will show in your work, that will show with your teams. But it will also expose you again to different ways of thinking. Like I have been so myopic, been in New York all my life, lived in the city all my life. And because of the pandemic now, like everybody else, being forced to find other ways for vacationing, right? In the past, my vacations have always been, oh, let's go to Europe, let's go to India, like really like, let's get on a plane. And now we've been, traveling, 2 hours upstate, and I'm upstate right now. And it's just a different way of thinking. It's like, holy shit, there's a whole life outside of New York City, which, it sounds really shitty for me to admit it out loud, but this is what happens when you put yourself in bubble, and any bubble. And a bubble could be that of your company, that of the city you live in, that of the people you surround yourself with. So travel, nourish your soul. I don't know if you guys know about Stefan Sagmeister. How many of you know about him? Raise your hands. Have you guys heard about him? Okay, I highly Google that you look into him and read about his story. He's an incredible designer, and I don't know if he still runs his company, but for many years he ran one of the most incredible design agencies in New York. And what was really cool about him is every 7 years he shuts down his company completely. He shuts down his company for 1 year, and he travels and learns something new. So 1 year he was in Bali learning how to do basket weaving. Another year he was in Japan learning how to make coffee. I don't know, something different, something unique. And then he'll come back and he'll open up his agency again, and he'll run it for 7 years, which I think is so fascinating. And his work, and like you can see his evolution and what he brings back to the clients. And there's a TED talk on him and his practice of why he does it. Again, I'm not saying, leave your career for a year, but find your version of how you're going to step out of this bubble. These two are related, right? So you could even just decide to be out on a vacation with folks that are different and are not in the same world as you, and that's okay. So this is going to make you a really good leader over time and an amazing marketer over time. Knowledge does not compensate for experience. I have another personal story to share here. I was 4 years out of school, and I was in a press meeting. It was my boss, myself, and a journalist. And this was an agency where we had a lot of hospitality clients. The Starwood Hotel was one of our clients. And we had just also launched a beautiful meeting space that was our business. And the press, the interviewer was interviewing us, and I ended up saying something that I wasn't supposed to say. I think I ended up saying, oh yeah, and Starwood Hotels is also one of our clients. And the interviewer immediately was like, well, doesn't that compete with what you're doing now with your with this amazing meeting space that you've launched? And my boss, beautifully, elegantly answered that. And in my head, it wasn't even an issue. And then he pulled me aside and he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, Jinal, you're precocious. You're extremely intelligent. You're very smart for your age and for the experience you have, but you do not have the experience. Let me tell you why that what you just said could have gone completely differently for us. He could have thought that we were competing with our clients. He could have wrote something incendiary. We could have lost a client out of this. So that type of finesse, that nuance, that judgment only comes from experience. So that he was so kind in the way he gave me that feedback. He acknowledged, which was very kind of him to do, that I was smart, which I don't know, if he had just told me that, you fucked up, I think it would have really done a number on my self-esteem. But he was so kind in how he gave me that feedback, but also it was so, it just sat with me so well because I truly understood that I just need to do the work. Like, I'm smart, I have the knowledge, I have the hunger, but I don't have the experience. Like, my 4 years out of school does not compare to his X many years, right? Um, and again, that's not to say that it's like, oh, like there's all these amazing founders with no experience. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is, um, there's a difference between believing that just because you know something, you can do it and presenting that front. And there's a difference between actually doing the work. So even the founders who have the knowledge or maybe have just a dream, they're actually putting in the work to bring it to life. They're getting that experience and they're surrounding themselves with advisors and smart people, whether it's investors or their team members to help them get there. So this is a very like long way of saying the agency world, when you're surrounded by creatives, when you're winning awards all the time, and that's just the culture of that agency world, it's very easy to forget that there's a lot more left to learn. So I would just caution you guys to never rest on your laurels and to never feel that, oh, you won an award, you've done something once, that means you know how to do this. Keep doing it again and again and again. Do the work, put in the work. And oh, that was it. That was the last piece that I had to share with you guys, which is perfect because we actually now have enough time to have a conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would love to spend the next 30 minutes answering questions for you and just getting to know you guys.
Great. So if you guys have questions, either raise your hand or pop it in the chat. Jinal, I have a question for you as people are starting to put their questions in. So you have worked at a bunch of different types of companies, big and small. What would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of working for a startup or a direct-to-consumer brand, or as opposed to maybe like a more established or long-standing company?
I don't think there are necessarily any advantages or disadvantages. I think it's just different kinds of learnings, right? At big companies, you learn about how to do things at scale. You're not just trying to make decisions for 100 consumers or 1,000 consumers. You're making decisions for millions of consumers. So it just is a different muscle in your brain that gets activated. And I think that experience is supremely helpful. I think working at big companies also gives you a very disciplined approach to how to do things. You learn from so many people who are very accomplished, who come from different backgrounds, and who, you're surrounded by incredible individuals. So you learn a lot from them. So you grow in many different ways. So I think there's a lot of benefit to that. And you also have a chance to, in big companies, if you are responsible for one small thing, it's still a pretty big thing. So you get a sense of learning how to do even the smallest tasks with insane integrity, and that sense of responsibility is really incredible. I think that the benefit of working at small companies is also, incredible, like where you learn how to do multiple different things. You learn how to I don't want to use the word hustle necessarily, but you learn how to be scrappy and get stuff done. And I think most importantly, at smaller companies, you learn how to build things. So what ends up happening is, and this is something I'm learning from my boss right now. He often talks about how builders are different from people that just grow things or people that have to maintain growth. And that's very true, because when you're trying to build something from scratch, especially in the startup environment that we are in, no one has all the answers. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's not necessarily a strict discipline. Like, you could build something today and then a few weeks later completely dismantle it. So it's definitely not, if you're really all about security and comfort, and then that can be very jarring, but I think it can still be a really helpful and character building experience. So I think there's lots of different things you can learn. In my career, I've had the privilege of starting at working at like a mid-sized company, and then at a very small company. Then J. Walter Thompson was very large, as was Newell Brands, and now Swell and then Fed are small and hoping to get bigger. I think that I would say, any situation or any kind of organization or job that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, that's the right one for you. You should always feel a little uncomfortable in the job that you're in.
I love that. Okay, great. Oh, Kim Wong has a question. Kim, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, I want to ask, like, because you had a journalism background, um, how was the transition from having a journalism background into working with like consulting and marketing? Or like, were there any things that like that helped you with journalism, or like, did you struggle with anything particular going into advertising role?
Nothing at all. There was, I think the struggle was, like I was a student and then I was working. I think that struggle is something everybody goes through and figuring out like, oh shit, like college life and real world are so different. Um, I think that I'm very appreciative. I think there's another question also from Devanshi. If I could go back to beginning of college, what would my major be and my career path? I think I can answer both questions. I don't believe in regrets. I think that I truly believe that whatever decision as an individual you're making at whatever point in time, you're doing your best. And I always sort of keep that in mind. Sometimes that works out, sometimes that doesn't. Even when it doesn't work out, there's still a great learning out of it, right? If you look at it that way. I wouldn't change my past, the decisions I've taken for anything. Um, in studying journalism, I think that the skills that really helped me is communication. Like, in journalism, you're really learning the what, how, who, why, when, how, like how to craft that story. And it's very much like a researcher, investigative mindset, which is absolutely what you need in marketing because you're trying to sort of apply that same mindset to your consumers. Journalism also teaches you how to be just very write really well. And I think that's a skill I cannot underscore enough. Like, be incredible writers, be incredible communicators, especially as the world now more so than ever is moving towards remote working, and that's not necessarily going to go away anywhere. So much of your work life is going to be over written communication, whether it's Slack, whether it's email, phone, of course, as well, but a lot of documentation and all that. So I think journalism really gave me a great background for that. And I think the last thing journalism did is instill curiosity in me, where I think as a journalist, like you're taught to dig deeper and find that true story. And I think that's so true with what planners or strategists do in advertising or what marketers do, which is dig deep to find that consumer insight. And you know it when you found it. It's the same thrill when you, as a journalist, when you find that story, like it's like, this is it. I found something, I found a jewel here. And I think the other thing also, this is just how I operate. I love sort of operating on deadlines. That's something that comes again from my journalism training. It just, I think even as a personal practice, I always give myself deadlines. It's like, do this by this date. And it's just a way of being accountable to myself. And even with my teams, the one thing they know about me and working with me is this is like my, user manual to working with Jinal. It's like, listen, if you say you're going to do something by so and so, it needs to be done. If it's not done, I need advance like warning, and you need to prep me. I do not like surprises when it comes to deadlines. So I think those things I've learned and I'm very grateful for. So I would not, Devanshi, to answer your question as well, I wouldn't change. I actually do truly believe that if you are going to pursue a career in marketing or in advertising, I don't think it's something necessarily kids grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to grow up to be a marketer. Like, I've never been that person. I've never heard a kid say that. I think it's something you develop an interest in, or most people fall into it, like I fell into it. And I think that sort of the broader liberal arts background helps, business helps, anything honestly that you've studied helps, because it gives you a really amazing point of view. There's so many people that work in marketing that have had their undergrads be in biology or sciences or law or um, physics and every kind of major. So just study what really interests you, because that means you're feeding your curiosity, and there will be a way you will be able to connect the dots back to your profession. And then one question by Emily, which is, what career mistake has given you the biggest lessons? So many. I think, if you I will say that approach your career knowing you're going to make mistakes. I think that if you are going to be extremely hard on yourself over one mistake you make, you're going to be focusing on the wrong thing. I will say is, don't make the same mistake again. I can't begin. I think I already shared one of the mistakes I made in that one small situation, which is so small, right? But that was such a good learning lesson from me. I made mistakes in hiring. I made mistakes in picking the wrong jobs, in misjudging like people. I've made mistakes in, God, there's so many to count. Like I had an email go out once that featured a competitor's product. Like that's like the worst kind of mistake you can make. And you know what though, the world doesn't end, and you fix your mistake if you can fix it. If you can't fix it, you take ownership of your mistake and you make sure you don't repeat it ever again. You know, because then that's not a mistake the second time. Then that's you being lazy.
Great. So I know Ariana had a question. If you want to unmute Ariana.
Hi, I actually was thinking back to your slide where you said having something to say, but saying it in the right way, or knowing when to say it and saying it concisely. I was wondering if there's like a way, I know it comes with experience, but also a way to be proactive. Maybe there's exercises you can do, like writing exercises or something, because like I feel like that's something that's super important, and I would like to be proactive at learning about it or trying to make my skill of that like a lot better than it is.
That is such a great question. I think there's actually a few tips I can give you there. You know, this is also very useful if you're interviewing. We've actually been interviewing. I've been interviewing a lot, and even at Newell, I had to build a team of 80 people in a very short amount of time. So I've interviewed a lot, and I can tell you that, you know, crisp, clear, strategic communication will always win you an interview over if you're meandering, if you are doing a lot of ums, and if you haven't thought through. So a couple of tips I can give you. One is prepare, whether it's a meeting, whether it's an interview. So if your meeting is, let's say, about like, oh, we want to decide in this meeting, what should we charge for this new service that we want to introduce, right? Let's say that's what the meeting is about. Go in prepared. And when I say prepared, know what the competitors are charging, know what your own history has been in that area, know what your consumers want. Like, go in prepared better than anybody else, and take notes. I think this again goes back to my own habits as a writer. I love taking copious notes, and I like to make sure that I have this ammunition, as I call it, like that we can call upon. And I think this is good training right now as you guys prepare for your jobs or your interviews. So go in prepared. Even if it's an interview, right? People are going to ask you, like, you can Google now, like, what are the, you know, most asked interview questions? Like, look at what they are, write answers out to it. Have like 5 or 6 case studies from your own, whether it's your college life, whether it's other jobs or internships you've had that you can talk to. For interviews, I think there's a lot of conversation on the STAR format. Do you guys know about that? The situation, which is here's what the situation was, here's what I have to do, here's the action I took, and here's what the results are. So prepare yourself and write it down if you had to. I've always found writing things down just helps me prepare better. And once you write it down, for some reason the brain retains things better as well. Second thing, when you're speaking, do not meander. If you are asked a question, first answer the question. And then if you have anything else to add to that, then say, oh, and in addition, then add whatever else it is that you want to add to that. But first and foremost, answer the question you asked. I cannot tell you, I've been in so many interviews right now where we'll ask a question and either the candidate will answer a different question, which means that you didn't answer my question straight up. I asked you this and you're telling me something else, which is like, which means they're not paying attention either. Secondly, to answer the question, they'll like ask 5 more questions, or they will, and sometimes that's necessary. But then sometimes, you know, it's like you'll meander. It's like, well, you could do it this way and you could do it that way. No, do not meander. You know, talk about how you would approach it. If it's a question, if it's a hypothetical question, someone's asked you, like, well, how would you price this? It's like, okay, if it were me, and this is the data that I do have, based on all of this is what I would do. But also, I know that I could be wrong, so I would also, you know, double check it with X, Y, and Z. So do not meander. Answer the question you asked. And then always, is there anything I've answered better for you that I haven't? Is there, is this clear enough? So just make sure that someone has understood this. oftentimes it also helps, like if you haven't understood the question, or if you're in a meeting, you haven't understood what someone's saying, rephrase it, be like, just so I understand this, am I hearing you correct? And then repeat what you think you've heard. So all those habits are really good to get you in that mind frame where you are becoming a crisp, clear communicator. Is that helpful? Okay,
Great.
cool.
So Meredith, I see you have a question. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi. My question is more focused on Feather right now. I noticed you guys just did a rebrand, so I was wondering if there were any memorable insights or great things that you found along the way that helped you build this new look and the new brand.
Do you like the new rebrand?
I do. Color.
Thank you. Yes, we did it in record time. We did it in 4 months. We are very proud of the work. A couple of things. I think first, before any rebrand is a really fancy thing, right? It's like every marketer goes and it's like, oh, I want to rebrand everything. It's like, no, that's be a strategic reason why you want to do this. In our case, we had a really strong reason why we wanted to do this. One, our logo as it stood, it wasn't very scalable. So if we were to do different kinds of marketing, it was really challenging for a logo to scale in different sizes, whether it's on digital or in like large environments. Second reason for us was our colors and the way our photography worked was very Zen-like. It was a dark green color. Our photography was very like, it looked very like quiet, very peaceful, which was beautiful. But then as we did audience research and we learned more about our audiences, we learned that the audience was actually super dynamic and energetic, super ambitious. Like they really wanted to like achieve the world and everything, which was amazing and so inspiring. And we felt like, well, this doesn't feel like it accurately represents like our audiences. And even when our audiences talked about their home, they talked about like, look, we have amazing outside hustles, but home is like my sanctuary, and it needs to feel special. It's mine. And there was just so much energy that they had around this that we knew we wanted to infuse the brand with more energy. So we had very clear reasons why we wanted to do that. And then, with COVID, of course, like home means so much more to all of us. We're spending so much time at home, and we did some research around that as well and got some incredible insights and data. So all those things informed our, why the rebrand. And then we started actually approaching the rebrand. I'm a huge fan of, and I'm a geek out over semiotics. And if you guys don't know about semiotics, Google it because it's very fascinating. It's basically the study of symbols. And we chanced upon the archway, something a creative agency presented to us, and we absolutely loved it because across cultures, and I see, there's so many of you from different cultures here. I see, when you show someone that archway, you immediately have similar feelings. You feel like it's inviting, it's warm. It usually means an entryway or doorway to something, like you're outside and going inside. Archways have also in history been used, for like large, in large structures and architecture. Archways are really important in them. So we were really drawn to that and what it, emotionally, what the symbol represented. So that's why we figured like, okay, what could we do with the archway? And sort of that's where the conversations evolved, and we ended up with what we ended up with. That's a much longer story. I actually wrote about the whole story on LinkedIn. I wrote a whole thing on behind the rebrand. So if you guys are interested, you're welcome to go read it.
Great. Let's do a question from the chat. So Jessica was asking how you would recommend people who are maybe new in the workforce advocate for themselves, when it comes to negotiations or promotions, and especially that for people of color who are in the industry.
That is such a good question, and I wish I knew the answer to that. I'm sure my own I'm sure my own biases have maybe prevented me from really standing up for myself or negotiating hard for myself. I think that I don't want to give you like a bullshit answer and say like just do the work and have substance and all of those things. We know that that's not enough, especially if you're a person of color. I think I'll say two things. I've been doing a lot of mentoring recently with Black professionals, and I think the one thing I've also found that to be true about my own experience is because of how we've been conditioned, whether it's culturally, with media, with what we see around us, we do come into at the table with a slight inferiority complex. I think that we are conditioned to believe that we have to work harder than others, that others are better than us. I mean, it's definitely been true for me. I don't know if most of you share that feeling. I think that what I have found lately, I wish I could say I found it when I was much younger, but lately, what I am finding a lot of solace in is leaning into my strengths. And this is something I've been telling all the women that I've been having conversations with and mentoring. And a couple of things I've started to see, it's like in their resumes, the way they talk about their work, they often undersell themselves. On LinkedIn profiles, the way they present their work and career journey, they're often underselling themselves. So I would say that, get together with your friends, maybe your allies, and have them take a look at your resume, have them take a look at your LinkedIn profiles, and have them sort of give you advice on how would you write it. Ask the men in your life on how would you write it, because often women are also, we struggle a little bit more in terms of how we present ourselves and how we claim our wins and our strengths, and men sometimes are better at doing that. So get advice from your circle of trust to sort of really put you on paper in a really great way. And I found that when I see myself on paper as someone else could see me, it gives me a lot of confidence. So lean into your strengths, start there. And yeah, and I think I don't really have any other more constructive advice to give you. I do think that so much of it is also based on who you're interviewing with and whether they are an ally or not, whether diversity is truly something that the company you're interviewing at is a priority for them. I had a huge chip on my shoulder initially about like, I don't want to be hired just because I'm a woman or because I'm a woman of color. I have to say I've changed my stance on that, because I think that I think being a woman and being a woman of color is what is a huge part of who I am. It gives me a very unique voice, and my experiences are very different. I was born and raised in India. I see the world differently, as do all of you. I'm sure Daijiro sees the world different from Ashley, sees the world different from Yon. So I think it's important to like think of that as a strength and not think of that as something to hide or something that's, really lean into that, like, and really treat that as this is what makes you unique and this is what your true strength is. Because once you start seeing it that way, others will as well. That's the one thing. And that's so true of marketing too, right? Like once we tell people how to see a product or a service a certain way, they start seeing it that way. So that's not very different for us as well. At least that's what I'm working on right now, and I found that to be working. The more I believe in this myself and my own strengths, the easier it's for others to believe in me.
Great. And shameless plug, but next week, guys, we actually partnered with MAPE, and we have a panel on how you can actually advocate for yourself and negotiate a raise and a promotion. So that's on Thursday, and I'll send out details for that on Monday so you guys can sign up. That's a great question. So Casey in the chat asks Jinal, do you have any recommendations on developing a work portfolio that demonstrates the individual impact you made in an internship or a job or, during your college career or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Have a website. Can you guys still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. Have a website. Highlight a bunch of projects, but use a very, like I talked about earlier, present them in a very, here's what the situation was, here's what the action we took as an agency or a company, this is a specific role I played, and here's what the impact was. And the other thing you could do is, as you're starting out your careers, get testimonials and recommendations and put them on your website. So let's say you interned at an agency or a company, ask your direct manager or your colleagues or who else you might have worked with to give you like, hey, would you mind like giving me a 3-sentence testimonial? I would love to put that on my website. That will help me, that will offer more color and texture to my own effort as I look for a full-time job. I think those things help. Like I definitely I definitely know that when information is presented in a very succinct manner that tells a good story, that gives me a good sense of what this person specifically did, but also gives me a good sense of what the true challenge was that they were all tackling, it captures my attention, and it definitely gives me a sense, you know, with the resumes and all of those things that we read, like it gives you a really good sense of how the person thinks. And if the person demonstrates clarity and strategic acumen in how they're thinking, then there's a very good chance we're going to want to at least have them come in for an interview and see if that's also true in person with them. So I think that is a good way to start.
Great. Jason, I'm going to call on you to unmute. Jason has a question.
Hi, how are you? So
well, thank you.
So my question starts from this. At school, at university or high school, we're giving a very broad picture of what advertising is, what marketing is. And we're giving little piece tools here and there telling us this is what you're going to do. And then when we get to internships, we're handed into small responsibilities. And we're given tasks. You do this and you do that to gain experience. But my question is, one day when you actually became an executive in the marketing department, in practice, where do you actually start? What are the first few things that you actually start doing?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking me once you,
yeah,
so for where I am as an executive, what
the decision maker.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting. It should never start in any different place from where it would start, even for someone that's not a decision maker, which is number one thing. What are we trying to achieve here? You know, what is the company goal for this quarter? What is the company goal for the year? Okay, great. I get it. So the company goal is we need to make XYZ dollars and we need to save money here and we need to do whatever those company goals are. Then I ask myself, okay, amazing. What can marketing do now to help us get close to the company goals? Because as much as I would like to think marketing, you know, doesn't run the world, and we do need to partner with our colleagues in supply chain and finance and other areas in business development to help achieve the company goals together. So the question you have to ask yourself is, okay, what can marketing do to help us get to the company goals? And then that's where I start. And I start answering like, okay, well, what are the activities that need to continue, always on activities? What are the investments I need to make? Like, you know, do I need to open up on new channels? Do I need to do strategic work? Is there some information I'm lacking that I need to go get the data on to do the strategic work? Is there something with my product experience that I need to improve upon? So I think those are the questions you start asking. You know, I think I will say this, like, think of, you finish high school now, I guess, right? Or you guys are finishing up university now. If you had to give advice to a high schooler who's going to enter college, and you know, like it's no different, right? Like you would tell, like if they ask you, like, oh, what should my major be? What would you ask them? You say, like, okay, well, what is it that you enjoy doing, and what is it that you want to do? Wouldn't you always start with the goals, even if you were giving someone that advice? Like, it's no different really in the business world too, right? Like, what are we trying to do, and how do we best try and do that? And then I mobilize my team. So once I have that answer, once I have a perspective, I try and sort of discuss that with my team. I try and get their input on it, because they always have amazing perspectives and ideas to build upon, and sometimes they disagree with me for right reasons. So we have a discussion around it, and then we will agree on a plan, and we'll create strategies, and then we will basically meet every week to decide how we are faring, how we are moving forward on the plan, and is it working? And if it's not working, how do we pivot? How do we test and learn? So same way, if you're studying to be an engineer, midway you realize, actually, I don't really like engineering, and I took this advertising class, I loved that. You're going to pivot, and you're going to not be an engineering major anymore, right? So I think that's just really, it's no different. So if you ever find yourself, actually, I'll tell you something. Michelle Obama said this. I forget where she said it, but she said that she's been in meetings with all these world leaders and the like top CEOs and the who's who of like the most famous people in the world, and she said that, let me tell you something, they're no smarter than you and I. And that is very true also of the business world. You have to learn to apply common sense and your own experience, and like, okay, when was I in a similar situation and how did I solve for that? What were the questions I asked myself? Work backwards, reverse engineer. You will very likely get to at least thinking through what that arc, what that rhythm needs to be about what you need to do.
Thank you.
Great advice. And I think for our last question, so Casey Pettiford asked, right now students are having a hard time finding entry-level positions or internships. Do you have any advice on things they can do to make them stand out or seem unique amongst a big candidate pool?
Couple of things. I'll tell you what I did. I think, look, pandemic aside, it's always nerve-wracking when you're graduating college to figure out like how you're going to stand out, how you're going to get your first job and foot in the door, all of those things. I'll say that your resume, it really does help immensely. So get as many people as you can to help you on your resume, make it crisp, make it tight, make it strong. The one thing that I did that helped me tremendously, I made sure I had internships throughout my undergrad career. I was also a very prolific blogger, so I had something very new to discuss in interviews, because at that point, blogging wasn't even a thing. Blogger didn't even exist when I was, blogging as a word didn't even exist when I was like, it was called online journaling or diary land and live journal. So I had something really interesting to offer and talk about. So think about what that could be for you. Are you helping an entrepreneur right now? Are you mentoring someone? Are you really, really interested in skateboarding and that's your jam and all the ins and outs about that? I think what you guys have going for you, which in the world of marketing is deeply valuable, is you're the new generation. You're Gen Z. Everybody in the future is going to want to market to you. They want to know how you're thinking. They want to know what you like, what you don't like. And we would often, like you can represent your cohort really well, but also how well you represent, because no one just wants to have a Gen Z be like, oh, you just want TikTok videos. Like, sure. But what other value can you offer? How can you be more strategic? And that, listen, this is what's truly working. This is what the communities are saying. So figure out what it is about you that interests you the most, because don't fake it. Like, I think, however weird your interest is, I think that to me is really interesting. Like it's what's going to make you interesting. I'll give you examples of people who really impressed me when I was hiring. In fact, on one of my jobs, someone came and recommended through our chief operating officer. And I remember actually others wrote him off saying, oh, he's just another privileged, like he's someone who's, and I was like, okay, sure. Like that's how at least he got his foot in the door, but let me meet with him. And I met with him and, and I won't defend his privilege. He definitely, like, he was Stanford undergrad and like he definitely had things on paper. But what was really interesting about him that got me really interested in him was two things. One, throughout his undergrad at university, he was a professional wrestler. I was like, I was like, wow, like, what does that even mean? Like, talk to me about that. And it was so fascinating. Like, he absolutely loves wrestling. And like, there's like wrestling leagues and competitions and all that happened, which I had no idea about. And to me, the fact that he's so dedicated to that thing, and it just shows that he saw it through. He's still very interested. He still goes through, keeps up with that community and all of that, which to me is a really good signal and like, okay, this could be a really amazing candidate for us. And then the other thing he said, which I was also really interested in, is like he loves video games. Now, of course, like a lot of people his age love video games, but the way he spoke about it, right? He was like, listen, like you guys should be selling things on what is that famous Twitch? And like the way he talked about it, the way he was relating back his passion about video games and how brands could use like video gaming as a way to like market and reach consumers. I was really impressed by that. So it didn't even matter to me that how he got his foot in the door or how he got that interview. He earned his job completely. Another example is someone else who did not go to an amazing college, who did not have like the incredible pedigree, but still came in via recommendations like, hey, can you meet this person? And he impressed me for other reasons. His attitude was so lovely. He was just you could just tell, like he had just very optimistic energy. He was very curious. He was into like outdoors and fly fishing, which I don't know anything about. I have zero interest in, but the fact that he was so interested in that was so fascinating, and that made him stand out compared to everybody else. So, this is a long way of saying, one, use all your connections, all your parents' connections. AEF, like, reach out, cold email, doesn't matter how you get your foot in the door, at least with an interview and a meeting. Once you have and even cold email, that's how I did. I was an immigrant here. I didn't have my parents being able to make me connections or introducing me to people. I cold email, and I would send out 10 emails a day, and 3 or 4 people would respond. And that is a pretty good response rate. So get yourself those meetings, put yourself in front of people, and really speak about your passion. That is what will differentiate you. That is what will set you apart. And if there's a right fit, you might even get the job. If you don't get the job, do not let that discourage you. You are going to think about it from 2 different ways. One, think for the long term. Build relationships. If a busy executive has taken time out from their day to meet with you, to give you their advice, to look through your resume, that is very valuable 30 minutes of their time or an hour of their time that they've given you. If you keep your relationship with them, keep connected with them, every once in a while send them an email on what you're doing, what you're not, you will always be top of mind. And when you just don't know how the world works, guys. Like, the world works in really incredible ways, and you never know how some random connection from somewhere is going to end up giving you the best job of your life 5 years down the road. So be good at keeping and maintaining relationships. And then second thing, if you don't get the job, or it's like, oh, I've tried this, I've been cold emailing, I don't get the job, don't get discouraged. It's a tough time right now. Offer to work for free, if you can afford to. I'm not usually a fan of this, but I've done this. It's worked for me. It's helped me. I get to build my resume out of it. I've always gotten something out of doing that too. Or even if they can afford to pay you a stipend, offer to help them. Be like, hey, is there a project I could participate with you on? Or can I follow you or ghost you? Or be creative. Like, you're not going to lose anything if you just ask, right? Like, the worst thing that can happen is they'll say no. And that's not that bad, because you don't have something that you want anyways from them right now. So just ask. A lot of people, I can tell you, when, college kids reach out to me, first of all, on LinkedIn, they're very, it's very few emails that actually get my attention. Most of them are very cookie cutter. Most of them are very, hey, I'm graduating. This is my major. I want to work with you. I can't even tell you how many of those emails and messages I receive. So how are you going to stand out? So take the time to get to know the person you're reaching out to, and write something thoughtful, and say something thoughtful about yourself that puts you aside from all these other random emails that are coming our way. Tell me about your background. Tell me you're a 3rd generation XYZ and you grew up here, but you have, like, what's your perspective? What makes you unique? And like I said earlier, believe in what makes you unique. Believe in what sets you different is your strength. So it's all tied in together, and keep trying, because if it doesn't work the first time, doesn't mean it won't work next time.
That's really very good advice. I think that's it for the questions. Thank you so much, Jinal, for everything. This was so interesting and insightful. And I know I saw that you put your email in there, so thank you for that. Guys, I wanted to tell you about the events that we have next week. Our next Made Summer web series will also be on Friday at 1 p.m. And we're going to hear from someone at TikTok who's going to tell us how businesses effectively use TikTok, the platform, to engage with their communities. So you don't want to miss that. I know we have a lot of TikTok users. And then on Thursday, we have the panel that I mentioned with MAPE, where it's at 5:30, or it's 6 p.m. on Thursday, and we're going to learn how you can, negotiate a raise and a promotion, and how you can really advocate for yourself, even if you're shy or if you're new in the industry. So don't miss those. Anyway, thank you so much, Jinal, and hope to see all of you guys next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.